We've got some breaking news in the fight for freedom in California as a federal judge hands down a stunning rebuke to Governor Gavin Newsom and California's liberal politicians, citing First Amendment and Second Amendment rights that they have violated. Coming up, I'll tell you what happened, what the court ruling means, and what we're going to do next. I'm Carl DeMaio, chairman of Reform California, and man, we've got a great bit of news for you today. A major ruling by a federal judge, which really strengthens our First Amendment and Second Amendment rights in the state of California. And it's a big rebuke to Governor Gavin Newsom and his cronies in the state legislature for their constant attacks on our freedoms, particularly our First and Second Amendment freedoms. Here's the big announcement from Firearms Policy Coalition, which is doing great work on the legal front. It says a federal judge has issued a preliminary injunction against California's ban on gun shows at the Orange County Fairgrounds and on state-owned property, saying they likely violate the First and Second Amendments. This is huge. Okay, this is a law that was passed a few years ago that we have been not only opposing, but we've been supporting this sort of legal action against these laws. Here's the story from a few years ago. This is from 2022. California just banned gun shows on state property. Will other states follow? And it goes on to talk about a number of bills that first started out, for example, with state property where I live in San Diego County, the Del Mar Fairgrounds. More on that property in just a moment. They're having financial problems. Imagine that. Well, the Del Mar Fairgrounds said, well, we don't want to take any of your dirty gun shows anymore. We don't agree with guns. It's dangerous. It scares us. And so they were denying Crossroads of the West, which is a very large company that does gun shows all around the country. But it was a long-standing gun show in San Diego at the Del Mar Fairgrounds. Very successful, lots of attendance, lots of support from the community. And so that decision at the Del Mar Fairgrounds was bolstered by a piece of legislation carried by a local Democrat politician to basically say, that's right, ban the gun shows at the Del Mar Fairgrounds. Well, then Democrats across the state said, well, if we do it in one fairground, then why don't we just do it on all state property? That's where this 2022 law came into effect. All state property, all state fairgrounds locations, any state facilities are not allowed to have gun shows on their premises. Dave Min, who is running for Congress right now in Orange County, in the 47th congressional district, he's a state senator. We call him DUI Dave because he can't control his alcohol consumption and got arrested for driving while under the influence, which, by the way, probably much more dangerous than having a gun show. Anyway, DUI Dave, State Senator Dave Min, carried the legislation. He said, quote, the state of California should not profit on what is essentially blood money. Right? The state of California should not profit on what is essentially blood money. Look, if you want to start getting into how the state of California benefits from bad actors and bad things, take a look at the porous border and the drug trade coming across, State Senator. State of California likes the fact that they're getting the voters, the businesses are getting cheap labor, and God only knows what you're getting off of those drug dealers. Of course, the state of California also is very permissive when it comes to drug dealers because we've decriminalized drug trade. I wonder what sort of kickback or financial benefit you're getting off of that blood money, as overdoses are now the leading cause of death for individuals 45 and younger in the state of California. You want to talk about blood money? Let's take a look at some of your bad policies. Let's take a look at your epic homelessness that's happening. Let's take a look at all of the fatalities from releasing people from prison early, violent felons, or not prosecuting existing crimes. Senator, you have no right to lecture us on blood money or any sort of harm that's going on in the community because your policies are exponentially worse. And let's also recognize that the Second Amendment is not about taking lives. It is about protecting lives. It is our Second Amendment right, human right of self-defense. That is what the Second Amendment is there for. That is what the right to carry is there for. What the senator doesn't want you to acknowledge or recognize is the fact that the Second Amendment saves infinitely more lives than it takes. And the folks that are taking lives with the Second Amendment overwhelmingly are people who wouldn't follow any law. These people are criminals. They're evildoers. And that's why we have our Second Amendment rights, is to protect ourselves from those individuals. Well, so that's the law. It would ban any gun show from any state property. And really what they were going after were these state fairgrounds that are located around the state of California, owned as government properties for these events. So here's the lawsuit. And it is B&L Productions doing business as Crossroads of the West, a variety of plaintiffs here, including the Second Amendment Law Center, Second Amendment Foundation, California Rifle and Pistol Association, very good groups here, suing Gavin Newsom and Rob Bonta as the two people who really are the enforcers of this law, the governor as well as the attorney general. So the summary that the judge issued is to grant plaintiff's motion for preliminary injunction. And this is key. A preliminary injunction is basically saying that the judge believes that constitutional rights are being infringed upon, and that while the court case will go through the normal process to finally adjudicate the question of constitutional rights, that the risk of harm to people's freedoms is such that an injunction would be justified. The state of California filed for an emergency stay on the judge's ruling, and the judge denied that stay. So basically, he's saying here that the California legislature recently enacted two statutes that effectively ban gun shows at the Orange County Fairgrounds and more broadly on all state property. Plaintiffs, a group of gun show proprietors and enthusiasts, sued the governor of California and other state officials and agencies in an effort to invalidate those two state statutes. Plaintiffs moved for a preliminary injunction. Plaintiffs argue the statutes at issue infringe on both their First Amendment freedom of speech rights in a public forum, freedom of speech, and, by the way, freedom of assembly. We have the right, if you're going to have state property that is open to being rented by the public, that you cannot have a content restriction on your rentals. You can't say, well, certain shows are good and certain shows are bad. It'd be like saying that we don't want to, using government property, rent to a gay wedding. That it somehow we think that conduct is offensive. You just can't do that. You can't have a content restriction on a trade show or an event or a conference. So it's freedom of speech, freedom of assembly issues, but also Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms. The judge goes on to say, after reviewing the parties' extensive briefing and conducting a hearing on the motion, the court concludes that plaintiffs have established they are likely to succeed on the merits of their constitutional claims and that they have satisfied other requirements for injunctive relief. Accordingly, the plaintiff's motion is granted. Defendants are preliminarily enjoined and restrained from enforcing the two state statutes at issues. And it says two state statutes. Better contact the judge and let him know that he has a slight typo. It still has the effect of law, so that's important. Anyway, so it goes on to talk about Crossroads of the West and the liability insurance that they get, how they don't have a history of violence or problems. It goes on to talk about Senate Bill 264, which was basically the bill that we were talking about earlier, that would ban these gun shows on state property, as well as Senate Bill 915, which specifically focused on the Orange County Fairgrounds. So it's state property plus the state fairgrounds. And this is not the only bill that actually went into effect. As I mentioned earlier, there is the Del Mar Fairgrounds legislation that also went into effect here in San Diego. So the judge did a great job here, and we're absolutely thrilled about the ultimate decision. And it's Judge John Holcomb. He's a United States District Judge. And again, this was handed down today. We are just absolutely thrilled. Well, what it shows, though, is that Governor Gavin Newsom and the state legislature, this is not the first time they've been slapped down on First Amendment and Second Amendment grounds, but it shows an alarming pattern of behavior. They don't care about what the Constitution says. They're willing to pass laws and start enforcing laws that will trample on your constitutional rights. They don't care about your constitutional freedoms. They wantonly overturn and override your freedoms. And they basically taunt you by saying, well, you're going to have to sue us to stop us. And I guarantee you that even with this court case, as we've seen in previous Second Amendment court cases and First Amendment court cases, that Newsom and the legislature will just simply pass another law, changing it slightly, but fundamentally trampling on our rights again. I have said this. I believe it. I see such an appalling pattern of repeated infringement on our First and Second Amendment rights in California that I think we need to have a statute that penalizes politicians if they're voting for and implementing laws that repeatedly touch on the same topic that the court has already ruled on. It's as though they are just basically ignoring court rulings and deciding that might makes right, and that they are trying to play a game where they constantly pass laws and it takes them no time at all to pass a law. They just simply vote. The governor signs it into effect. But then we've got to file lawsuits like what Firearms Policy Center has been talking about here. And these plaintiffs, this costs them money. This takes time. The gun shows have been completely canceled. So Crossroads of the West has been financially penalized and hurt by these rulings. But again, with Gavin Newsom, he doesn't care about your freedoms. He doesn't respect the rule of law. He doesn't care about what the U.S. Constitution says or what the Supreme Court has to say, what a federal judge has to say. This guy is a world-class bully. He simply wants to skirt the law. And this is a pattern of behavior. Time and time again, he's been shot down by judges. And yet he turns around and basically does the same thing over and over and over again. I think that the Crossroads of the West should sue the state of California for financial losses. Don't know if they can get them, but if there's any justice, that should be part of the solution here. Let me also point out that this is bad for taxpayers because these state fairgrounds, anytime we get any chance to have business, a show, a convention, a fair, in this case, a trade show, we should be excited and we should be welcoming because it's business. It's money in the bank to support these communal assets, these communal facilities. Take a look at the Del Mar Fairgrounds. Remember, they were one of the first to turn away Crossroads of the West and the gun shows because they were violent and they were afraid of the guns that would be promoted at these events. This is from earlier this year. Fairgrounds projects healthy budget for 23 while noting concerns. Okay, well, this is a euphemistic headline. Take a look at what the concerns are for the fairgrounds in San Diego. And remember, they're too good for having a gun show. This is their executive director stating, this is especially concerning since this 22nd District Agricultural Association, DAA, is basically the Del Mar Fairgrounds. That's a government name for the facility. Revenue comes from only 3 months of 12 of the year, June and July, when the fair is operating, and January when additional revenues add up. Well, the gun show used to be 4 times a year at the Del Mar Fairgrounds, so that would have been extra revenue for them. The head of the agency says, quote, if the inflation factor goes up by 3%, our costs go up by $2.1 million, which would wipe out all the excess profit we have for 2023. Imagine that. If inflation goes up by 3%, you do realize who's in the White House, right? Joe Biden? Yeah, I know. It's probably going to be much more than that. And $2.1 million could certainly be offset by having 4 Crossroads of the West gun shows. But no, you're too good. You are too good to take the blood money, apparently, of Crossroads of the West, even though Crossroads has caused no harm whatsoever to folks. In fact, there was one shooting at the Del Mar Fairgrounds. It was during one of the fairs a couple years ago, and I think it was like a Snoop Dogg supporter or something. Some rapper was involved. It had nothing to do with the Crossroads of the West. Imagine that. It was the traditional annual fair where there was a gun fatality or a gun injury. The executive director goes on to note the precarious financial situation of this state agency that's turning down gun shows. There are only 3 months out of the 12 months that we are in positive territory. The rest, we are in the red. We are in a deficit. What this is kind of highlighting is the enormous amount of risk we are carrying by having one very profitable program during the year, and that's the fair for 21 or 22 days. Well, my dear, you could actually have 4 Crossroads of the West gun shows, but no, you're too good for that. Again, the story in the Coast News here, liberal rag, they don't want to talk about the Crossroads. They don't want to ask questions like, well, if you're so destitute for money and you're worried about your finances, why don't you find a way to get the Crossroads of the West back? Why are you turning away business? Look, we need to replace the politicians in California. And so that's one of the missions at Reform California. Our organization is fighting every day to restore sanity to the state of California, but we're going to need your help. Please go to the website, reformcalifornia.org, and sign up, contribute so that you can support our mission to recruit candidates for the state Senate, the state assembly, and even all the way down to county board, city council, and school board, so that we can defend your freedoms and restore sanity to our state's political system. Also, sign up to be a volunteer so you get our voter guide. That's important because it helps you to educate your neighbors and your friends and family on the ballot measures to get around the politicians' deceptive titles, as well as who we've endorsed for the various offices I mentioned previously. Finally, help us break through the censorship of the liberal media. Like this video and subscribe to this channel. Click the notification button so that you are given the update when we post our news stories each and every day. Every day we post a video, a news story, so that you know what's really going on in the state of California. So help us help you stay informed by subscribing and hitting that notification button on YouTube. Also, share the video and like the video so we can goose the algorithm and get this message out to more people. Until next time, Carl DeMaio, Chairman of Reform California. Thanks for watching. Help us break through the censorship of the liberal media by liking this video, sharing it with your friends, and subscribe to my YouTube channel.